The relentless rain hammered down on the deck of the rusted cargo ship as it swayed through the murky waters near Jakarta. Alan drifted in and out of consciousness, each jolt reminding him of how close he had come to meeting fate's end. When he finally opened his eyes, the blinding pain in his head fought against the dark confusion gripping his mind. He found himself on a rough cot inside a small, dimly lit cabin. Alan squinted at his surroundings: mismatched furniture, a cluttered desk piled high with old maps, and an open porthole through which the sound of the storm was a low, distant roar. Instinctively, he touched his temples, tangling his fingers in the bandage wrapped tightly around his head. Each movement sent spikes of pain lacing through his skull. A grizzled sailor, appearing every bit as storm-beaten as the ship itself, entered, wavering slightly as he balanced a tray of steaming rice and herbal tea. "You're awake," the sailor grunted, a look of relief and curiosity mingling on his weather-beaten face. "It's about time. Where am I?" Alan managed to croak, his voice barely more than a whisper. "Near Jakarta," the man replied, setting the tray down beside him. "You were pulled out of the ocean, half dead, with nothing but that pouch and some papers. We almost lost you to the sea." With effort, Alan sat up, his eyes catching a glimpse of the water-stained pouch resting by his side. He reached for it, the motion causing his mind to throb. Inside was a passport marked with the name Alan and a photograph that seemed to be of him, though the face was unfamiliar. Alongside the identification were scraps of paper scrawled with cryptic notes and numbers that made no sense. "Do I know you?" Alan asked, his mind frantically grasping at the ghost of recollection. "No," the sailor chuckled, "but you owe me a drink for saving your hide." He paused, eyeing Alan closely. "You don't remember anything, do you?" Alan shook his head slightly, his expression one of frustration and a flicker of fear. The only certainty was that he needed to discover who he was and why he found himself in such a perilous position. A need to act pressed against his confusion, stronger than any other thought. "Days ago, we heard rumors of trouble in the city," the sailor continued, lowering his voice. "Something big is happening in Jakarta. If you've got unfinished business there, it might just find you before you find it. You better be careful." As the ship traced its cautious path toward the harbor, Alan gathered what little strength he had, each piece of the puzzle around him offering no comfort. He could feel the pulse of tension in the air, a silent promise of danger that urged him forward. Somehow, he knew Jakarta held the key to his memory and his survival. Alan eased himself out of the cabin and onto the deck, the rain abating to a fine mist. The skyline of Jakarta loomed ahead, a sprawling maze of lights and shadows. With every step towards the city, a sense of urgency quickened his pulse, sharpening his instincts. Upon docking, Alan slipped silently into the rhythmic chaos of the bustling streets. Jakarta was alive, its vibrant energy echoing the turmoil within him. The notes from the pouch were as cryptic as ever, but Alan clung to them, convinced they were vital to understanding his past. As he moved through the city, a face occasionally flickered with faint recognition, no more than a shadow of familiarity in the shifting crowd. He stopped by a street vendor, hoping to blend in, and as he tasted the unfamiliar spices of a satay skewer, he began piecing together the fragments. The numbers from the papers, the patterns of the streets, and the murmurs of activity gathering around certain areas. Finally, a name from the notes leaped to life: Jaya Holdings. It resonated with urgency, unlocking a latent part of his mind. Alan made his way toward the address, conscious of the shadows trailing him in the fading Jakarta light, aware that someone had already taken notice. He reached the imposing edifice, a sleek glass-fronted building, and hesitated before stepping inside. As he did, two figures followed, blocking his retreat. Their intentions were unmistakable. Alan's muscles tensed instinctively, and as they closed in, a primal self-defense mechanism sprung into action. A flurry of movement erupted in the lobby, his body moving in lethal precision. In moments, the would-be assailants were incapacitated, a mix of shock and determination etched on their faces. Amid the chaos, a woman stepped forward from behind the security desk. "Alan," she called softly, her eyes meeting his with a complex mix of emotions: fear, hope, recognition. "Who are you?" he demanded, adrenaline still coursing through him. "I'm Mira," she replied, her voice steady. "We've been searching for you. You, You're one of us. You had a mission, but something went wrong. We didn't know if you survived." Alan's mind spun with possibilities, yet instinctively, he felt a flicker of truth in her words. This was the lead he needed, the connection between his past and the tangled present. "Why Jakarta?" he asked. Mira handed him a photograph. "Because everything ties back here. The organization you worked for, we're trying to stop it, but you have the final piece. You're the key." As realization dawned, Alan understood that the path forward was fraught with risks, but also with answers. He glanced back at the building's entrance, then at Mira, nodding slightly. For the first time since awakening, Alan felt a hint of purpose guiding his every move. Together, they stepped into the clandestine corridors of Jaya Holdings, Alan's heart steady with resolve. The road ahead promised danger, but it also held the promise of truth and perhaps redemption. In this vast city that did not sleep, his story was only just beginning as he followed the thread of his past into an uncertain but purposeful future.